All right, let's dive into a skill we all think we have, but if we're being honest, very few of us have truly mastered. We're talking about the profound and, yeah, often misunderstood art of listening. We're going to explore what it really means to listen and why it might just be the key to how we think, how we remember, and maybe even how we build our very sense of self.
You know, this image just kind of nails our modern problem, doesn't it? On one side, you've got this incredible ancient tradition of Socratic dialogue, this deep exploratory conversation. And on the other, well, that's us today. So often just walking right past each other, heads down, totally lost in our own little digital worlds. It really makes you stop and wonder what we've lost along the way.
And that leads us to the big question for this whole explainer. When we're in a conversation, are we actually listening, or are we just, waiting for a pause, silently rehearsing our comeback, our killer point, just waiting for our turn to talk? The difference between those two things, it's more important than you can possibly imagine.
Okay, so to get what true listening is all about, we've got to first separate it from something we confuse it with all the time: giving advice. We've all been there, on both sides of it, and understanding this difference is the first big step to figuring out why so many of our conversations feel, well, kind of hollow. And wow, when you lay it out like this, the difference is just stark. Giving advice, a lot of the time, is really a power move. It's about feeling superior, right? It's about solving someone's stupid little problem so they'll just shut up and go away. But a real conversation? That's a whole different ballgame. It's a team sport. It's about exploring an idea together, articulating thoughts, maybe for the very first time. It's actually thinking together.
So, to really see what happens when a person has never been truly listened to, let's dig into a really powerful clinical story. It's an incredible illustration of that desperate, fundamental human need to be heard and the total chaos that follows when that need just isn't met.
A client, we'll just call her Miss S, said this to her therapist a few months into their sessions. Just a gut punch of a statement. It's filled with so much pain, but also this profound uncertainty. I mean, how do you even begin to process those two words, I think? And then she added this, a detail that took an already horrifying situation and made it completely impossible to grasp. 5 times. The confusion there is just staggering. What could that possibly mean? It points to a life so foggy, so ambiguous, that even the most traumatic events are lost in the haze.
And really, Miss S was almost a ghost of a person. No real friends, no real career path, and deep down, no real sense of who she was. And nothing shows this better than her resume. Can you believe this? It was 50 pages long, kept in a box with sections for my dreams and books I have read. That's the CV of someone who has absolutely no idea who they are or how to tell the world about themselves.
So to try and understand her state of mind, the source material uses this, well, it's just a perfect scientific analogy, a supersaturated solution. Just picture a system that is fundamentally unstable, holding way more chaos than it can handle, just waiting for anything to come along and give it some kind of structure. Okay, so here's how it works. You can dissolve way more sugar in boiling water than you can in cold water. Now, if you cool that water down very, very carefully, the sugar stays dissolved, but the whole thing is incredibly unstable. The second you drop in a single seed crystal, bam, all that extra sugar instantly crystallizes around it. Mrs. Mind was exactly like that solution, just a chaotic jumble of unprocessed experiences, desperately crying out for any orderly story to crystallize around. And you can see how this puts her therapist at a massive crossroads. With a person this vulnerable, this ready to crystallize, any story he provided would instantly become her truth. And this whole situation, it leads to a radical and really powerful idea about what memory is actually for. Just look at the two very different paths he could have gone down. He could have given her a left-wing ideology. You are an innocent victim, and your doubt is just more proof of that. Or he could have given her a conservative one. You are a walking disaster, and you need to wake up and take responsibility. Now here's the really chilling part. Because her psyche was so supersaturated, either one of those stories would have felt completely, 100% true to her, and it would have defined the rest of her life. And this right here, this is the absolute heart of the matter. The therapist realized the point of memory isn't to create some perfect, objective video recording of the past. That's just not possible. The real purpose of memory is to be a tool. It's a guide for the future, a way for you to learn from what happened so you can stop the same damn thing from happening over and over again. So, if just imposing a story on someone is the wrong move, what's the right one? Well, this brings us to a really practical technique for genuine listening that anyone can use, and it was developed by one of the greatest psychotherapists of the 20th century.
That man was Carl Rogers, and he understood something so deep about us. We jumped to judge, to evaluate, to give our opinion, because actually listening, like really entering another person's world and seeing it from their eyes, is dangerous. And why is it dangerous? Because it might change us. And for most people, that is one of the scariest things in the world.
So Rogers came up with this simple rule for any argument: just stop. And before you can say your piece, you first have to summarize the other person's ideas and feelings back to them, and not just to your satisfaction, but to theirs. It sounds so simple, right? But Rogers himself said this is one of the most difficult things you will ever attempt to do.
But if you can pull it off, the payoff is huge. First, you actually get what the other person is saying, for real. Second, for the person speaking, hearing their own jumbled thoughts reflected back helps them boil it all down into a useful lesson. It turns that painful memory into a guide. And third, you can't create a straw man, a distorted, easy-to-attack version of their argument. You're forced to deal with what they actually said.
Let's see how this plays out with a quick, powerful example. So, a client just blurts this out in a therapy session, this awful, harsh statement: "I hate my wife." It just hangs there in the air. Now, the therapist doesn't judge, he doesn't offer advice, he just listens.
And just by being heard, the client actually hears himself. He immediately backtracks. That's too harsh. He starts talking about how his wife's behavior reminds him of his mother's. And then, boom, the breakthrough. He realizes he's acting just like his father did. And in that one moment of insight, he pulls it all apart. His wife isn't his mother, and he isn't his father. That has nothing to do with my wife. That right there is the power of just letting someone talk and think.
And this brings us all the way to the ultimate point of this whole explainer. The act of listening, it isn't just about being a good friend or a good communicator. It is fundamentally tied to the very process of thinking itself.
So what even is true thinking? It's not just a monologue. It's an internal conversation. It's the ability to hold at least two different points of view in your head at the same time, let them have it out, and then listen to the debate. You have to be an articulate speaker for both sides and a wise judge listening in. Now, let's be real. That is an incredibly difficult skill. Most of us are just not that good at it. So what do we do when we really need to think something through? We talk. We speak our jumbled, chaotic thoughts out loud. But for that process to actually work, for us to hear ourselves think, we need someone else to play the role of that listener.
And that is the powerful idea that ties this all together. A good listener doesn't just hear your words, they help you think. They give you the space you need to have that internal dialogue, but out loud. True thinking is rare for the exact same reason that true listening is rare. Because in the end, thinking really is just listening to yourself.
So, as we wrap up, I'll just leave you with this one question. Just for a moment, forget about winning the argument, forget about having the perfect advice. Who in your life, your partner, your kid, your friend, coworker, who could you give the simple but truly transformative gift of listening to today?